SJ, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to talk about secrets revealed, practical examples from Coda. Um, so if anyone doesn't know yourself or Coda, do you want to give a brief intro?
Yeah, Coda is the best. If you're like me and you've spent your life trying to find the best productivity, organizing, collaboration tool, it's Coda. When I first started, I joked that it was like Trello, but on steroids. Some people call it Notion, but on steroids. It's essentially a doc that keeps everything together. So it's really powerful, really cool. And for all the nerds out there, it is a delightful experience to build just about anything. It's where we track all of our work projects, and it's also where I track my babysitter's hours. So it's a very versatile tool that's really designed to let you build anything you want with no code.
That's cool. That sounds really powerful. If anyone doesn't know me, I'm Matt from Dispatch. And Dispatch, similar to Coda, all about no code or low code. We help people build the very best emails, everything bespoke and custom to you. My goal as a former developer is ensuring that you don't need to talk to people like me to make beautiful emails. So we help with testing and email production and make everything great. And then we help you deliver it through however you send email today. So it's a very lightweight configuration. But we're not talking about Dispatch today. We're talking about Coda. Um, I think we had two topics we're going to touch on: how to move quickly and win at personalization. It sounds like Coda has like a really interesting approach to this, SJ. And then we're going to dig into some of the practical examples and emails that you've worked on that I thought would be pretty interesting. Um, so let's start with like moving quickly with a small team. What's your approach here? Like, how does Coda approach email, and what do you do?
Yeah, so we're a pretty small marketing team at Coda. We move as quickly as possible to get the kind of the basics out the door, but then also we're really into trying new things as fast as possible. That's part of the reason we explored Dispatch is we have a really strong core brand, and we were building stuff in our actual email tool of Braze, and it was creating so much friction with our brand team because we could kind of create whatever we wanted at any time with any colors, with any with anything. And so then they had to go in and either learn how to use Braze or give us a lot of feedback, and that feedback loop was messy. So we explored Dispatch to speed that process up, to give us a little bit more of like boundaries, gates, guardrails, so that we could spin up emails quickly without going completely off the rails with the way things looked. So it's been a really glorious experience where our designers can spin up like a full email, send it to Dispatch, and Dispatch turns it into an email that works. And that's been awesome because there's so many times we've tried to explain to, like, for example, I tried to use a drag and drop builder, tried to
Mm-hmm.
communicate to a designer what the elements looked like. And he was like, I don't have time to learn how to use this tool of yours. And so with Dispatch, they were able to do what they're good at. I'm able to do what I'm good at. And we're able to let more people create while knowing with confidence that we will get the eyes on it with the approval processes, with the themes, with the templates. It's just really productive guardrails. And that's been super helpful for us to do stuff quickly, knowing that eyes will be on it at the right time. And it's really, really hard to mess it up.
Yeah, I think guardrails are really important from that perspective. Email marketing or email in general carries so much risk because a broken button can be really disastrous, as well as like a bad logo or the wrong colors can that makes it to an executive that can be really unhappy. When you start talking about personalization, I think the risk is even higher because it's like everyone's received those emails where it's like hi blank and everything else. How do you balance like moving quickly with personalization with QA? What do you think about that in particular?
Yeah, it's been a high priority of mine to increase the personalization of everything that goes out. I want to make sure that my user, every time a user opens an email from me, it's either educational or delightful, and it feels like it was intended for them and not just someone like them. So we spend a lot of time trying to get the right data in, which any email marketer knows that can be like much trickier than you'd expect. You think, oh, I could probably get that data field. And then you're like, oh, actually that data field's going to come in a little weird. How do we like change it to make it look right? And then that requires that you bug somebody in engineering. And so with between Braze and Dispatch, we've been able to test a lot of different fields using Dispatch's, what's it called? Profiles? Data
The data
profiles?
profiles.
Data profiles. And then we use Braze catalogs. And so between those two things, we're able to create a lot of personalized content that will pull in the account that they belong to. Their name. We've even piped in some like special data or special language. We kind of did like a Spotify wrapped type email in December of last year. So about a year ago. Wow. Yeah, that like told them what kind of maker they were. So we were able to do all of that through Dispatch and get it tested and get it out the door. And it was glorious and it's there forever. We can pull it back up when we need to. That has allowed us to just move so much faster than if we were trying to spin that up just within Braze, because Dispatch allows us to kind of preview all of that before it goes out the door.
Yeah. How do you get by? Like, I know asking for developer time, especially as a marketer, is really hard. So when you want a new data field, you want to explore using a new data field in Braze, like how do you make that like the political argument for like, hey, like there's ROI here?
Yeah. So unless it's like really, really obvious, like we recently changed the way we like assign roles at Coda. So we had to email a lot of users. That was a pretty easy thing. We were like, hey, we need this field in order to communicate this message. But when you're talking about like more minute things of I need this ID of this very specific person, or even in some cases where we wanted to email our users who are on our enterprise plans and wanted to introduce them to their CSM, or introduce them to their AE in case their CSM had not had the chance to reach out yet. We were actually able to create a catalog in Braze that it was essentially just a CSV, where we house an image file, and that image file we can match with Dispatch so that when we send that email, it pulls their correct CSM. So one email that's firing, that's pulling up to 12 different images depending on the account's parameters. But we did all of that without an engineer's help, which was incredible, and it was really
Wow.
fun. We really enjoyed it. Yeah, and it adds to this personalization that later, we can ask engine, we can say, this is our open rate. It performed so much better this way. Or we say, actually, never mind, engineering, we failed, was a waste of time. And that's also great. And that instills trust that we're not bringing them just like one-off requests that are just silly, harebrained ideas. I can take my harebrained ideas, give them a run, and report back with harebrained idea, or bad.
Nice. Nice. I want to go back to something you actually just said, because it triggered something for me. Is like, so that you talk about kind of like the whole goal is to move quickly. But when many people actually, talk to me and talk to a design system like Dispatch, we're viewed as something that's going to be slow or take a long time to adopt. Like, what was that experience like for you?
Oh, I want to be like, have these people used other tools? Is that sassy? I mean, it took a little bit, but Dispatch is so fast and their support, and like at this point, it's like Dispatch has replaced at least one whole person's job. Not that we fired anybody, because we didn't, but it essentially has allowed us to not need a whole other person managing that whole process. We'd either, because we were vetting the idea of bringing on either a freelancer or a contractor to actually design our emails. And then once those emails were going to be designed, they would kind of be locked in. So unless you knew HTML, you could get in. I know enough HTML to be dangerous. So I was like, we could do that, but that seems quite silly, right? To spend, let's say we spent 4 weeks designing an email, which is a lot of time, but it's an important email. We spent 4 weeks designing it. Then we let the contractor spend 4 weeks coding it. That email now only exists in that state. Like maybe we can change some copy. Maybe we could swap out a photo. Sorry, I'm very pregnant and a little burpy.
That's okay.
You can keep that one in there. With Dispatch, we could bypass all of that because what we're creating then becomes modular. So we spent 3 to 4 weeks creating and designing an email. Dispatch turns it into an email. We can then use email over and over again in different varieties. And that was a big thing for us. So the setup for me was nominal compared to the setup of a freelancer, a contractor, or just a new designer entirely, or a developer. Nominal, but like just easy as pie. So if anyone's nervous, I'm super curious what other tools they've onboarded that took longer. I would be shocked. I'd be shocked.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't want to be too self-serving, but one of part of the impetus for starting Dispatch was the belief that marketers wanted to experiment with emails more, but because email is so hard, they spent, if they had like, this much time, they spent this much of it every single time just building the email and making sure it's right. And so they only had this much time left for experimentation. Kind of the idea was like, well, if you only spend this much time building, you have all this time to experiment, to try to pull in a new field from Braze, like to do whatever. And that was kind of like, I'm kind of hearing is that hypothesis is right, that you're allowed more time now to experiment. You didn't, yeah. So that's kind of, yay, pat on the back
Oh
for me.
yeah, for sure. We've been able to, my favorite thing is we, we try to plan ahead as much as we can. And we had an email that was going to go out, and we had some freelance writers helping us with it. And I had given them what I thought would be a good layout for the email with lots of like placeholders and said, can you guys write this copy? They wrote the copy. By the time we got it all staged up in Dispatch and I looked at it, I was like, I hate this. But because of the nature of Dispatch, I was able to just like move those pieces around. And I know that sounds so simple, but if you're in a drag and drop builder that's been jerry-rigged, or if you're in a true HTML format, that would be a lot more complicated than it was. I was literally just like, oh, I want this section now at the top. I want this section now in the middle, and then I want this section gone. And it took me 2 seconds to make that swap. In addition, I was able to make it a variant or a secondary draft. So if they didn't like it, I could just pitch it. Those like little things that we've come to know and appreciate in other tools in our lives still is not present in email today. And so Dispatch is the first time it's felt like email is catching up with the rest of our tools where you can collaborate, move quickly, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of wild given email is like the #1 channel for most marketers, but hey, it's where we're at.
It's so far
Yeah,
behind. It's very silly.
yeah. Let's touch on transactional emails as well, because I understand this is something that you're trying to pull into your purview as well. Like, how does Coda work with transactional? Like, what's your kind of philosophy there?
Yeah, right now we're kind of in an interesting spot where we use Amazon Web Services, SES, to manage most of our transactional, and then a lot of our marketing happens in Braze. And unfortunately, that leaves us in a situation where frequency capping is difficult because we don't know how many emails somebody is truly getting, as well as testing is quite slow. But the premise of moving all of those over to our tool Braze would be a substantial lift. So what we've done is we've essentially tested a few transactional emails in Braze. And what we're kind of finding is like piping all of that data into Braze becomes a large data load. It's a bit messy. You run into privacy concerns. That was new to me. Even so, our users use things called docs. And even to just move in that doc title into Braze suddenly puts our users' privacy at risk. And so we want to be very careful to make sure that information that's being moved around is not being run much. And so with Dispatch, we're actually now working on connecting that via API to SES. So all of the design and the beauty of the emails happening in Dispatch in a way where we don't need engineering support. But it's firing from SES, which keeps our users' data private and more protected, as well as sends them a better email like right out of the gate. So I was sharing that just a few weeks ago with our engineering and developers, and they were like, oh my gosh, this would be so cool. Because right now, if I wanted to change an email, they would have to go and encode it. I would have to talk to a designer. The designer would have to make sure they designed something that could be easily developed, which in email, is always a disappointment when you're like, oh, I can't do this in email. I can't do this in email. We'll be able to build that and then tell them it's live, go. So they've been very excited by that. They're like, that's way better than having to pipe all this data into a different location and deal with privacy concerns.
Yeah, that's super cool to hear that they're excited about that. That's I mean, I got my side on the transactional side, being that developer, someone from marketing coming to me with a new design and having to code it in. And I know that's like it's a kind of a scary prospect because, once a developer too, once they open up their development tools, like lots of them don't even have spell check. So, something
They
might
don't have
get
spell
copied
check.
in.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
have to kind of make the case for it to be more beautiful or more interesting to look at. And that's a hard case to make. Unless you just have a really, really cool developer who's just got tons of free time on their hands, which I don't know any of those. They're going to be like, hey, I need you to make sure that this has a real point. And some parts, the art of marketing, the art side is a bit of following the vibes, seeing how things look and feel, that like back and forth. And nobody wants to waste a developer's time with like, well, could you put this photo in and see what that looks like? And they're like, God, and they're nice. all of our developers are nice, but it does feel like we waste their time. And this has allowed us to potentially keep our noodling and our experimenting in a place that's not wasting other people's time as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think like everyone feels like they're strapped for time now, and so like being that respectful and as well like being able to like let people focus on the things that excites them, I think is pretty cool. Yeah. Do you want to switch gears and take a look at some examples? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. So here we are in the Coda instance of Dispatch. One of my favorite ways to pull up stuff is to just search for it. So one of my favorite examples is an email we sent, I think it was in the first quarter of this year. We called it Better Meetings, but the whole premise was the idea that meetings suck. So as you can see, these are real Codans that are just so frustrated with Zoom meetings. We had them all submit these photos. And the whole concept was meetings suck, Coda can help make them better. So starts off with kind of a relatable vibe and then leads into what are the actual things that you can do to solve that. So you can get in sync while async. We have these like done reading buttons that are really helpful so you can see who's participated.
Mm-hmm.
We have how to cancel pointless meetings, say what's on your mind. And so this was the first of many, and it included, this was the first one, and it included templates that you could actually use to create a better meeting at your company. And as the series went on, we got more and more, essentially the meetings did in fact get better. So let's see, I think it was this one. Oh, so one of the things is we actually ran a meeting using our template and then showed people exactly how it worked in real life. So this is a GIF from that video.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was really fun to do. And the concept was good meetings don't happen on accident, how we use our tool to actually run the meetings. So it was kind of taking the tool, rubber meets the road. And then I don't remember which one actually had the before and after. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
What persona do you email the Coda customers from? Is it coming like from Coda, from the Coda team?
It typically comes from, like, this one will come from Coda, but I'll show you a few here in a little bit that actually come from an individual. So it'll depend on kind of the tone of the message. So yeah, that's a great question. It's always one of my top questions is who do you want this to come from? Do you want it to come from Coda corporate? Do you want it to come from Coda person? Do you want it to come from somebody that like, for example, their CSM or their AE? That's how we would do that. But yeah, this one came from Coda, and I love this one because it flips. So
yeah, it's cool.
Excited. So you're invited to a meeting that will make you smile. And so this had them join a webinar where we talked more specifically about joining a webinar. And so this is one of our best performing campaigns in Q1. I think it overlapped with Q2 a little bit. But we saw people who hadn't done anything in 6 months in our product getting in and actually joining a webinar or using our template. A fun finding is we had predicted that people would use our template and then join the webinar. But actually what we found was that users either used the template or joined the webinar. So essentially 2 different learning styles. So there was a lot learned from this campaign. But more than anything, people just really enjoyed it. It gave them something to talk about. It was very relatable, and it was all kind of tied back to getting users back into the product.
Yeah, I got a question. In the first email you sent, you had just the kind of the static of the the Coda team kind of frustrated with meetings, and it looks like if you evolve that to the GIF version of this, did you like plan that out, or just the first email performed really well and so you doubled down on what you think was working? How did that go?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we originally just did this, and then after this one performed well and we were planning to do more stuff like the webinar, we were like, ooh, wouldn't it be funny? Actually, I think it may have been even some of these people who were in the pictures when they saw this email. They were like, ooh, you should do another one that flips to the happier faces. And so then I went back to all those people and I said, can you take a photo from like very similar places where you work, but with the happy face? And they were all super helpful. So yeah, I was really appreciative of them being willing to do that.
That's cool to see the iteration in the design and like the assets using too. That's really cool.
So a lot of these are our CSMs. So these are people working directly with our customers and our users who had said, we had asked, what's a question you get all the time? And one of the questions was like, can I use this to make my meetings any better? Or like when we asked what's hard right now in your job, people would say our meetings they're pointless, or we don't have enough, or like we're struggling to work async. So that was born from essentially a conversation with these very people who we were like, okay, cool. So then are you going to help us then? And they were like, sure. So we kind of roped them into it. Okay. So then other examples that we like, and this one's already, so initially when I shared the first example with you guys, we've already changed it twice since then, which I think is a fun, it's a fun
Wow.
example of how quickly we've been able to move. So this is the most recent version of how we welcome users who are, so let's say you started your first day at a new company and that company uses Coda, you'll receive this email. So our goal is to not just onboard our users to our product, but to onboard our users onto our product as their company utilizes it. Because Coda is so complex and so powerful, everybody uses it a little bit differently. Everyone has different cadence and rituals. So we
Mm-hmm.
start with making sure that they understand. We have personal, like you can see new user personal welcome blurb. Very,
Mm-hmm.
very technical. But essentially, and then it also defaults if we don't have one of those filled out for that account. We have a hunch that you're busy tab switching. You don't have time for much else. Welcome to Coda, your new do-it-all workspace. And
Mm-hmm.
so from there, we have three different options. They can start with a template, they can start with a guide. And so this guide is either a guide predetermined by the CSM. So for some of our accounts, we actually have built them, or they have built themselves entire hubs that they would prefer their employees use. So in that case, that will go here and it will
Yeah.
say their hub. If they don't have one, which isn't uncommon, we then have something for them there that defaults. Let's just say, so that way we have both. We have either something super personalized, and if we don't have that, we're not just ignoring them, we're still giving them something good.
Yeah, I know a lot of enterprise companies do this where like if you have like a totally custom onboarding flow, it's like a whole bunch of emails you have to set up, or the CSM has to manually send out these emails or something else. So this is cool. We've kind of like brought the two together. You can have a completely customized onboarding and the email just works with that, or it defaults to like a really great onboarding that Coda's probably spent a lot of time figuring out and making sure it like works for most people. So that's sweet.
Exactly. That was our goal, is that every time a new account onboards, the CSM essentially just has to put in this information if they have it, and then it automatically pulls the correct information.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
awesome.
we also say start with a friend. One of the things we've seen a lot of success with is offering live interactive trainings in lieu of the word webinar, because we're not selling, we're truly just trying to help you learn the product. We have start with a new friend. These like recently especially have been doing quite well.
I love I guess the vibe that Coda has, at least in email. I assume
Yeah,
it carries through with the product as well. But I love the vibe because it's getting stuff done, but also like it's not a lot of ego. It's very, very supportive. It's very like, hey, like, here's ways to help. And it's yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a really nice blend, especially for enterprise and for SaaS. It's like a super cool blend.
thank you. One thing I will say that we've learned via dispatch especially is, for example, initially dispatch, we requested, essentially it went icon, headline, subhead. And what we found is people didn't understand that that was clickable. They weren't clicking. And as soon as we started adding this little, like, and we reached back out to dispatch and said, can you add a button? Can you make it feel like a button? So if there's any like tips and tricks of the day, when in doubt, add a button, you guys. Just add a button, because this idea that users will understand that like something's clickable. They, like, I will say inline's pretty obvious. That's like an old, pretty typical, but just add a button. That was quick learning, but I appreciate you saying all of that, because we do work really hard to make sure that the vibes are right. I
Yeah.
always joke that like I could be more technical about it, but at the end of the day, are the vibes good? And if they're not, we should fix them.
Yeah, that's sweet. That's sweet. Also, like, yeah, it never hurts to add a button.
Yeah,
For
it
sure.
truly, like, you want to think that your design is like minimalist and smarter, but at the end of the day, we want it to be easy to use. And we found that adding a button is always a better move than not adding a button.
Yeah. Yeah. I had the opposite challenge in one of the campaigns we ran where the hero image, we had a huge splash image in a marketing campaign, and it wasn't a button, it was just an image because it was just like a really nice, like, sweet new
Really?
dispatch feature, big image. And the user feedback we got when we tested it was that like people were like, your link is broken. And we're like, there's no broken links in the email. Like dispatch will tell me all the links are good. No, they expected the hero image to be clickable, to be a button. I had this like massive like, oh, of course, like how did we miss that? But it was just like, I don't know, sometimes people want to click on stuff and you don't expect it.
Yeah, you have to be really sure if you don't want, like if you don't want it to be clickable, you really got to feel good about that.
Yeah, true, true. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, SJ, for sharing those examples with us. Yeah, I'm stoked for all the feedback and you're having a good time. I think we're happy if we're making your life with regards to email better. I mean, it means we're
Definitely.
doing our job. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. For secrets revealed, practical examples from Coda. Ooh.
These aren't secrets, just so you guys know. I'll tell anybody this. I can't shut up about it. So I'm just glad to be here.
Hey, that's awesome. That's awesome.